It's Saturday, it's Scotland, it's 1 p.m. and we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is a force for good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. Tommy says hello from loyal Coatbridge, and Graham, good to hear from you again, Graham from Dover, and Keith from Govan, and Mark from Maddiston in Falkirk. Good stuff, and Isabel from Falthouse, and Steve from Midlothian, and Letitia from Largs, beautiful town of Largs there on the coast, and Sarah from London. Thomas says good afternoon on YouTube, and Tony is watching on YouTube as well. Good afternoon, Alistair from Shotts. Do you know, this broadcast, we're going to be covering a lot of stuff, as we always do, and we're going to be laying down wisdom, and we're going to be dropping knowledge to confound those who would corrupt our great United Kingdom, because we're British and we love the United Kingdom and we want us to stay together. And we're laying down the truth daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly until those see clearly that we're back with the capital A to the double FG, and the truth of what we tell every single week and every single day on our social media platforms. Jim from County Down, good to see you in here, Jim, and William from Glenluce. Debbie, wonderful Debbie, hope things are good up where you stay. And got some interesting news that you might be interested in, Debbie, because in this program, we're going to reveal, after 2.5 years, we're going to reveal the true count at the All Under One Banner Scottish Nationalist rally in Dumfries 2.5 years ago, before we ever started to film them. They lied and they said they had 10,000. And this program, we're going to reveal what the true count is, because video footage has now emerged, which we've had the chance to study and count. And believe me, it's nowhere near 10,000, but we'll be getting to that in a minute. Marilyn says hello with a clap there. And Debbie says, waiting with bated breath. Absolutely, it's exciting news. And the funny thing about this is that the police as well gave a ridiculous estimation of 10,000. And many of us approached the police officer in charge, the chief superintendent, and said, you're not correct here. And he stood by his 10,000. Well, he's going to have egg on his face today, I'm afraid. And we're going to have to send him our article. You know, once we get that up there, we're going to have to just show him the evidence and tell him how he explains it. Anyway, more of that in a minute. Jody, hi to you, Jody. Well, had a conversation this morning with somebody who had just been shopping, and they were saying that they were shopping this morning with a heightened level of anxiety because they were shopping without a mask, and they were saying to us how awful that experience now is, and I completely concur with them. Hi, Marion. Hi, Janet. Janet says, always knew that Dumfries figure was a lie, that's for sure. Dougie says that he's calling from Bucky. Keep this going. We will, Dougie. We will keep it going. And this is our work now, that we have so many people who support what we do, and we're not going to give it up in any way, because we have to speak for so many people. And Steve there from Wellingborough in North Hants, a lovely part of the country, Wellingborough. So, yeah. Let's just talk about this COVID thing for a minute. Nigel says, proud of what you guys are doing. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we can't do it without the help of people such as yourself and all the other good people who are watching here. So absolutely, Jennifer, we are better. We are better together. So, yes, it started with the mask thing. It started with the mask thing. And if you didn't wear a mask, you were considered to be like a bad person. And the system, the government and the media and the television was kind of promoting the idea that you had to get behind that if you wanted to fall into line. And if you didn't want to fall into line, then there was something wrong with you. Now, I understand, of course, that most people just have to get on with their lives and have to comply to a large extent. But it seems that what the system did is it really manipulated that natural tendency of people to want to go along, to get along, and is manipulating it now and continuing to manipulate it in a bad way. And I want to get on to the next thing that this is, where this is heading now, because it started with masks, and this week we've seen, of course, is now moving on to vaccines. And the next thing is going to be that you have to take the vaccine or you'll become a social pariah. Christopher Jardin says, keep up the good work. Deborah says, Tier in Aberdeen is where she is watching from. I believe that's up there. Good. Fantastic. So, and the way this is happening, you see, is the British government and the Scottish administration are funneling, it must be millions of pounds, into the media, into television, into social media a lot, and into newspapers, of course, publishing their alleged health guidance. And so the television, the media stations, the social media platforms, and the newspapers all have a vested interest in taking this money and perpetuating this particular narrative. And they're not really going to stand against it because they need the money. And this is big money that will be coming in with these adverts. I mean, I go onto YouTube now, and almost every program that I'm going to watch has got a Scottish administration 2 or 3 minute rebroadcast telling me about how I've got to fall in line with what Nicola Sturgeon wants. So it's really getting promoted to an extent that you have to think, really, to be able to fight against that, you really need a very strong will, Robert says, Sturgeon said in April that wearing a mask would have no benefit, and indeed it would frighten members of the public. Well, talking about the frightening thing, that's an interesting thing that you point out there, sir, because I was very delighted, actually, to watch Piers Corbyn yesterday. Now, I'm talking about Piers Corbyn. That's the brother of Jeremy Corbyn, who's cut from a slightly different cloth from his brother, I think. But Piers is really quite of a controversialist and one of these guys that doesn't like to go along with the system and very often comes up with very interesting stuff. And he was outside, he had some supporters, and he was outside Lambeth Palace, which is down on the embankment at the Thames, which is where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives. And Piers was complaining about the lockdown and complaining about mask wearing. And he said something to the Archbishop of Canterbury on social media, which I knew about, but which I had never seen articulated or even mentioned. And he said that masking has, this is Piers Corbyn saying to the Archbishop of Canterbury, masking has satanic implications. And I've never seen, and satanic connotations. And I've never seen that articulated by anybody. It had to be Piers Corbyn who actually pointed that out. And it is true in history and in various ways of looking at those things that it does. And that's something that nobody's ever told ministers before. And it had to be Piers Corbyn. So I was very interested that he would say that. So that gets back to that whole wearing masks and frightening people thing. And disguising your true identity behind the mask. So there's a kind of deeper, darker thing going on there as well. Anyway, that's just a little bit of an aside which made me, which I was recalled to by that gentleman's comment. Deborah says, nice to meet you. Craig thinks Nicola Sturgeon is a dictator. A lot of, we read an article last week about that had been published in the Daily Telegraph, of all places, saying that Scotland was descending into a totalitarian state. And that was published in the Daily Telegraph. So indeed, there are connotations of that. Paul says the New World Order agenda is satanic. Indeed, that's arguable. Stephen Beer says the SNP are fully responsible for the reaction to the pandemic in Scotland. They failed to protect us by not locking down certain areas. Aye, so we've moved now on to the vaccine. That's the next thing that one is going to have to submit to. And it appears we have to submit to it because we have no politicians who will stand up against it. Well, I can only think of one man who has spoken very strongly against it. And you can see little clips of him on YouTube and Twitter. And that's Sir Desmond Swayne, who is an old style Tory, traditionalist style Tory, who's on the backbenches, never got to cabinet, never will get into cabinet. Why? Because he's got a mind of his own. Okay, he's somebody who can think up things for himself. And that's why these guys never get into cabinet. They spend their lives as backbenchers, and all of whom, certainly Desmond Swayne, could have been a fantastic prime minister, but would never get anywhere near consideration because he's got a mind of his own. So he's the only one who stands out and really says what everybody else is thinking. And that's a crying shame when you think about it. An absolute crying shame. Right, yeah, thanks for responding there regarding Aberdeen. Tommy says Lanarkshire's in tier 3 just now, but maybe to go into tier 4 next week. Well, I mean, our opinion is that all of these tiers are not necessary anyway. You know, it's all just smoke and mirrors. At the end of the day, this is a disease where the average age of death of the disease is greater than the average life expectancy of somebody in Britain anyway. So why would you even need a vaccine for something like that? These are the sorts of questions that we should perhaps be moving towards talking about now, because we are being manipulated around this fear. And what's going to happen, you see, is people are going... They'll make it mandatory, essentially, not in the sense of dragging you out of bed and strapping you down and sticking a needle in you, but they'll make it mandatory in the sense that you'll not be able to do anything without having a pass which says that you've got it. You're not going to be able to get a job or to travel abroad or even to go into a nightclub or restaurant, maybe not even into a shop. Of course, I'm thinking worst case scenario, but that's what could happen in this technological age. You could have to have a pass which says that you are COVID-free because you've had the vaccine. That's how they'll make it mandatory. And in that regard, there are a lot of people who would support that, and people in our parliaments who would support that. And that's what we have to simply be aware of at this stage, because I saw a horrible video yesterday of, I call him the Green Goblin. He's the leader of the Scottish Cabbage Party in Scotland, the Soggy Greens. His name is Patrick Harvey, and he pretends to be green. Now, by green, you would think environmentalist or ecologist, or even a kind of like hippie sort of thing. But he's none of those things. He, in our view, is basically is part of this totalitarian agenda, because he was pointing out, he was asking a question of the First Minister. This was 2 days ago. He was asking a question saying, what is she going to do to ensure maximum uptake? That was his phrase, maximum uptake of the vaccine. Okay, now this is somebody who is meant to be an ecologist, promoting the chemical industry, promoting Big Pharma. When I say pharma, I mean Pharma, big pharmaceutical. Now, who would have thought that somebody in the Green Party would promote Big Pharma in this way? You know, the Greens are meant to be alternative. They're meant to have an alternative view of health. I used to be an alternative health therapist. So I know that field, and I know that people who are genuine alternative health people like that, and he's certainly not. He's absolutely promoting the Big Pharma totalitarian agenda. And he was also suggesting, and he was implying, and he even used the phrase far-right people who would oppose the vaccines. And he even brought in Donald Trump, he even had a criticism of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters as the sort of people who would oppose mandatory vaccination. And he brought all of that into a silly little question at Holyrood. And I just thought, this country is doomed if people like him are making our laws. I mean, he should be nowhere near Holyrood, nowhere near the reins of power with that sort of totalitarian ideology. Anyway, that's something for 6th of May next year when we have the Holyrood election, and we have to get these people out. We have to have a clean out for the sake of this country. There's a huge window there for common sense to break through, because right now common sense is being constrained, and common sense is being marginalized. Common sense is now fringe in modern Scotland. Yeah. Paul says Nicola Sturgeon received money from, well, that might be so. I don't know fully. Richard says he was just thinking about Desmond Swayne a few minutes ago. The best men don't seem to make it. As that's often the case, it seems. Jonathan says there are YouTube videos by Professor Gupta of Oxford University, which are along our way of thinking. And Thomas says that Harvey is Sturgeon's puppet. Yes, it probably works both ways. Sturgeon is often Harvey's puppet as well, so it seems. Deborah says the precedence is that they're all addicts in a game, but it's lives they're gambling with. Davey says that he saw a video this morning about Pfizer and vaccines, and it would scare you. He says, I won't be taking it. He says, the vaccines can be understandable if it's a very serious disease, but as the data is now in about how serious COVID is, and it's if you look at the diseases as far as Britain is concerned, it's a way down. And Jim says we need to stand together and reclaim our heritage, culture, and everything that makes the UK proud to be British. Absolutely. We got a message this morning from somebody who was questioning whether or not we should go into doing things like defending the statues and defending those sorts of things. And the point is we have to, because this is what the United Kingdom is all about. It's all about our history. And the Scottish Nationalists understand that very well, and that's why they fight on that ground. So we have to fight on that ground, and come what may, we'll get those who fight on that ground will get accused of being this, that, or the next thing, and we'll get called nasty names and so on and so forth. But we just have to do that, because that's the way that you win. Christopher says the survival rate from the virus is 99.97% anyway. So, yes, I mean, why would you need one? Tommy says he just was checking that. Dave says that many people will want to take it, and there'll be many who don't. And Nicola will use this in some way as a run-up to the May election. I'm sure she is going to be manipulating it. Back in March, we said if she could keep this running until next May, she will. And look what's happening. She's going to keep it running until next May. Oh, my goodness. Paul wonders if vaccines are deliberately for depopulation. Indeed. Yeah, it's certainly something that is going to become a political issue now, and it should never have become a political issue. But until we can break out of this mania, this public hysteria, which is being generated by the politicians and by the media, until we can break out of that, who knows what the future is going to hold. And Stephen, of course, points out that last year there was 50 to 70,000 deaths from the flu, which is bad enough, but there was no lockdown and they didn't trash the economy for it. Davey points out, well, they haven't got a vaccine for the common cold, and yet they rush this through. How on earth did they manage that? And Christopher comes back to our point about history there and says, giving a clear historical perspective is essential to the narrative in defence of the Union. Absolutely essential to the narrative in defence of the Union. That's well put, Christopher. Okay, so we're going to move on, we're going to move on to something that happened 2.5 years ago, but which is ever relevant, because we believe here at A Force for Good in the truth of the matter. And back on the 2nd of June 2018, our thin red line of activists gathered in Dumfries. And that day there was, for the first time ever, there was a Scottish Nationalist march through Dumfries, organised by a group called All Under One Banner. And this was before we as a group realised that the SNP supporters would deliberately lie and would use lying as a deliberate tactic and exaggeration as a deliberate tactic in their efforts. So we didn't at that time think that it would have been necessary to film them or anything like that. And we made an approximate count as they passed us. And that count was approximately 3,000. And we did that because the time it took them to pass us multiplied by the average of the number that were passing us per minute worked out, we believed, very roughly as 3,000, certainly no more than that. And we didn't think anything more of it until the next day. The police in Dumfries said that there had been 10,000 there. And of course, that All Under One Banner people were saying that it was 10,000 as well. And we were like, no way would it be 10,000. The population of Dumfries is 31,000. Are you telling us that 1/3 of the town, or 1/3 additional, came into the town and marched up the high street and it took just like 20 minutes or so? There's no way that is, there's no way that's feasible or possible in any sense of the term at all. And several of us wrote to the chief superintendent and got back letters. And one of the letters that we got back here, and I can quote from the chief superintendent, whose name, to save his blushes, I won't mention his name, but he goes, "Numbers of those in attendance were much higher than anticipated, and on seeking advice from the police tactical advisors, who are experts in this area, the number of 10,000 was estimated. This estimate came from their professional opinion and experience gained from regular attendance at crowded sporting events across the country." Well, I don't know what kind of sporting events that they attended to make them think that a small rally up the closes of Dumfries came to 10,000 at all. But we were like, well, he's committed now. He even made a video to talk about how well the 10,000 march had gone on. It was one of his updates, his weekly updates on the Facebook page. They even made a video. The police made a video and mentioned 10,000 marchers. We were, of course, livid at that. We were not happy. And we were like, you know what? Next time, we're going to have to film these people from a vantage point and count them properly. And that was when we learned. And ever since then, we've had people filming from different vantage points. And we get the films, we look at them, we study them, and we actually count them one by one. And we accept a 3% margin of error either way on these sorts of things. But that was 2.5 years ago. And I'm so grateful for the person who pointed out to me a piece of video footage which has now emerged, which we've had time to study and indeed had time to count. And this is a piece of video footage which it fairly clearly, pretty clearly, shows the marchers passing the Coral booking office on the high street on the way up to the mid-steeple. And this video, the march lasts for 17 minutes. And we counted this march several times and we came to basically the same figure which we have now released. It was not 10,000 people in Dumfries. It was not even half that, 5,000. It was not even 3,000, which we overestimated. The true number of people at that march, which can now be proven by video evidence, was 1,854. 1,854 marchers in Dumfries on the 2nd of June 2018. And that's the figure, and that will now be added to our record of those marches. So that was a tremendous piece of work that we've done recently, and we've put up an article today on our website, aforceforgood.uk, and you can watch that. You can see that video and you can read it all right there. Jonathan says, well, slight discrepancy with police figures, and Debbie goes, LOL, that number does not surprise me. There you go, Dumfries count revealed at last, 1,854. 1,854. Isn't that amazing? And people will say, well, do you know what? Why does it matter what the numbers are? And we do hear that a little bit. And I would say to you, it matters a great deal. It matters a great deal. And it matters simply because, firstly, the truth always matters. The truth always matters anyway. So that's important. But because they're using exaggeration as a political technique to make it look as if their numbers are far higher than they actually are. And that has the effect of demoralizing our side. Believe me, it does. Because most people out there, they're not necessarily switched into a force for good. They don't necessarily know about our organization. They don't necessarily know the truth. They're only seeing and believing what they read in the newspapers and what they see on the television. And so they will say, 10,000 in Dumfries, what doomed? How could you get 10,000 marchers in Dumfries? If you can get 10,000 in Dumfries, it's all doomed. That's the way they see it, and it demoralizes them, and they give up ultimately. And that's the aim of the Scottish Nationalists, is to demoralize us. So we must fight back with the truth of these things whenever we can. And, you know, we never forgot about that Dumfries event. We never forgot about it. And we were like, we are going to get to the bottom of this eventually. And it's been 2.5 years later, and we've done it. 1,854 people at that march. Mr. Police Officer and Mr. SNP person and march organizer, you can't get away with that. These misestimations, you can't get away with them, because we will find the truth eventually and we will convey it to you. Dave says, keep up the good work, keep holding them to account. Another area desperately needing attention is the accelerating SNP cronyism in public appointments. If this continues, it won't matter who is in power. Well, that's a point. That is a point. Paul says, Sturgeon dreamt up the numbers. Yeah. It won't matter who's in Holyrood, because civil Scotland will be totally separatist. Well, it's going, there's a lot of that right now. There's a lot of cronyism in Scotland. Scotland is a very small political space, really. It's got a very small political order, and everybody knows each other. Everybody in the media, if they're not literally married to each other, they may as well be. And you have people in the media who are married to people who are in politics or in the council or wherever. It's a very incestuous little space, Scotland. It's like one big, it's like Pennsylvania. It's like it's like one of these American places where there's considerable corruption going on with the vote count. That's like what Scotland is writ large, almost. I'm exaggerating, of course, for effect. Mag says, keep up the fantastic work. I've learned so much from keeping up with your videos and posts. Thanks, Mags. That's the point of what we do here. Mark says, keep telling Sturgeon and our cronies that we are British and proud. Absolutely. Absolutely. We are. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, do you know what I'm going to do on YouTube? I have a bundle of national newspapers. That's the SNP supporting newspaper. And we buy them here in the office regularly because we have to keep up with what they're doing. But of course, it's a real task to have to go through them. So I'm actually going to go through one live on air. I've never opened it in my life before. And I'm going to go through it and I'm going to comment on it in real time. And I think that might be quite good entertainment. So that's what I'm going to do now for the next 10 minutes. We're going to do that exclusively on YouTube because we want to get in our viewers onto YouTube here, because YouTube is where the future of broadcasting for us is going to be. It's where we can really kick off once we get 1,000 subscribers or thereabouts. But also, what we'll also be talking about is this day in British history. And on this day, the 14th of November, was the birthday of a very famous man who became King of Great Britain and Ireland, and that was King Billy. He was born today on the 14th of November, and I'm just using him in order as an excuse, basically, to plug our new Christmas cards, which are wishing you a glorious British Christmas. And they have the monarchs, the kings and queens of Great Britain from the glorious revolution of King William and Queen Mary. Okay, and it's his birthday today. And that traces them all. Very good wee educational item, this as well, because it's got the names and the dates that they were reigning from. And you can get that by going to our shop. And on the back, it's got the heart here. And if you are a Union supporter, which means that you're supporting us monthly already, then just drop us an email and we'll send you one pack free of charge. And we'll be happily do that to the Union supporters because we do appreciate your monthly support. Good stuff. And if you want to become a Union supporter, go to aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters. And most people donate £1.15 a week, which is £5 a month. And that's really critical to keep our show on the road. Good. Folks, we're going to go now over onto YouTube exclusively. You can watch me reading a national newspaper in live time. I don't know what's going to come out of that. Haven't prepared it or anything. I've got a bundle here. I'm just going to put my hand over and just lift one and see what nonsense can come out of that. So please do, if you're on Facebook, please do just click on the YouTube link there. It should be at the top of the Facebook page, and we'll also put it into one or two of your comments there as well, just so you can click on that and come over and watch the rest of the show on YouTube. Okay, folks, please stick with us over on YouTube. Thanks for watching on Facebook. Good. So we're here, and just going to put this off. Put that over there. Aye, thank you, folks. Now, the Scottish Nationalists have got a very strong advantage in that they do actually have a newspaper that promotes their cause every single day, and that's a big issue, you know. And as a force for good, has to keep an eye on that, and we have to keep looking at that, and we have to keep seeing what they're coming up with. Okay, because it's basically an activist's manual. So we buy it most days, but we don't necessarily want to read it each day because, oh my goodness me, it can be a bit wearing, you know. So we usually do it in, like, we set aside a day just to go through it all and see if there's anything that we should know about, if there's any new ideas we haven't heard about. And occasionally you can get new thoughts as a consequence of that. So I'm just going to go through one right here, actually. Here's one. It's been completely unopened. Okay, this is Saturday. This is from back in October, actually. Fury as Johnston warns, prepare for no deal. Okay, and I'm just going to turn each page and comment on them, comment on it as I go. Now, the first page there's basically, very often there's nothing that's of any particular interest. Upset as First Minister's fury as Johnston tells UK to prepare for no deal. The First Minister is always furious for some reason. I wonder what that looks like in real life. Like, what does it mean for Nicola Sturgeon to be furious? Like, do you walk in and she's like banging the desk with a red face or something? I don't know. Or I'm not even going to bother even studying that, though, because who cares if she's furious or not? At the end of the day, she has to deal with it. It's not her place. It's not her place to have an opinion on Brexit, okay? First Minister pleads with Old Firm fans not to risk lives. Well, that was back in October when there was the talk about them going down to watch the game, the Old Firm game down in England. And of course, she puts it into like so serious. It's like life or death. Well, it's not life or death at all, of course, as we've been talking about earlier. They're having a go here at Tim Weatherspoon. Surprise, surprise. I wonder why they dislike him. Only because he's a Brexiteer, of course. I've spent 3 years in prison, but I'll do it all again. Something about Catalonia. Like, who cares about Catalonia? Okay. Now, yeah, somebody has, and Mary Black, she has a column every week. Okay, she gets an entire page to write her stuff, which is always just the same old thing. The game's up, the union's finished, blah blah blah. That she ends by saying that so many countries have taken their independence from the UK and never look back, and it's time for Scotland to do so. Well, this is a very old argument that we hear about. It rejects the idea that the United Kingdom itself is one country made up of 4 member states, and that it's not about Scotland breaking away from the United Kingdom. It's actually about Scotland breaking up the United Kingdom. It's about Scotland destroying the United Kingdom in the first place. And as we've always said, that's not an acceptable democratic thing for us to do on our own. We have a mandate for unity, and that mandate is held at the British Parliament level. Well, Jonathan talks about Angus Robertson. Here's Angus Robertson here. He's got a full page. He has another full page a week to rot off, basically. You see, he lost his position as an MP, and he immediately set up a polling company, okay? Because he knows very well that polling companies can be used just as much as law to move people's minds in certain directions. As we always say, polling is a black art, and it's not necessarily there to reflect opinion as much as to lead opinion in certain directions. And that's what he's been plugging away. And he's plugging away there lots of stats. I'm not even going to bother reading them about how independence, allegedly separation, is running at different levels between different age groups. Blah, 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 blah. Very irrelevant stuff nobody's interested in. Something about some group of Scots nationalists walking around Scotland just for the sheer sake of it, really. I guess good exercise for them anyway, carrying their flag. Some imperceptible article by Pat Kane, and my favourite is the letters pages. And the letters pages are very interesting sociological fact, in that what you've got with the Scottish nationalists, true believers, is that they love to write really long letters, really, earnest letters. And you read this, it's like, what motivates them to do this? They're really committed in that sense. You have to hand them that. Not that they're saying anything relevant. There's somebody writing about Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is a figure of hate for them. Nothing really there. Complaining about free trade deals with the USA. These are boring letters today. Do Scottish sporting victories affect how we vote? Well, there's an interesting letter which I don't have time to read, but I'm going to read it because that may have that may be something to do with it. To what extent do people feel more patriotically Scottish if, for example, the Scottish national football team is winning? If we beat the Faroe Islands, if we draw with the Faroe Islands 1-1, are Scottish people going, yes, we drew with the Faroe Islands, Scotland's brilliant? I don't know. Maybe. Yes, we only got beaten 2-0 by Tanzania. Fantastic. Scotland's on the up and up. So there's probably certain truth to that one. And then another big long letter here, which is very interesting about people. Somebody's figured out how to convince the don't knows and has written a big long letter about it. So I'll have a study about that in a minute when we're off. But it will be the usual thing, The usual thing. Just speak to them nicely. You'll be okay. And then there's like TV ratings, crossword, puzzle page, and sport. I mean, who buys a National to read the sports pages? I mean, that's mental. So that was actually a kind of boring issue of the National, but we'll maybe come back to that. We'll come back to that at another time. James says, I was watching on Facebook, but now switched over. King's Billy's birthday was on the 4th of November, not today. I think there's two dates in the past. There's old style and there's new style. And so the 14th of October is probably the new style date. I'm just going to Google that. But remember that when you go back into those days of history, there's always two dates that you've got to consider. So I see what Wikipedia says. It's got them both there. And in the right-hand column, it's got 14th of November. So, okay, 14th of November and possibly the 4th of November. But thanks for that thought. Thanks for that thought, James. Ernest says, there are evil people who are interested in destroying the United Kingdom. Isn't this treason? It is treason. It's seditious. The SNP is a seditious organisation. And I was having this conversation with somebody last week who pointed this out. It's like, how is that even tolerated? Breaking up the United Kingdom. Like in the old days, you know, in the old days, there was serious fights about those sorts of things. The Covenanters, the Jacobites, the British Civil Wars, all of these things were about keeping the kingdom together. And, you know, there was serious consequences for those who didn't want that. So it is a kind of seditious thing. There's no question about it. Aye, absolutely. And we talk about that, actually. We talk about the Covenanters, which is an area that we don't often hear about in our wee book for the Union, which is our wee narrative about the Union and about the creation of the United Kingdom. And you can get yours from our shop. It's only a £5. It's a great wee stocking filler. Buy 2 or 3 for friends and for wee presents for people. That's a good wee thing. Wee book for the Union. Check it out. So this week in British history, we mentioned the birthday there of King William, who's probably got 2 birthdays, depending upon whether it's the Gregorian calendar or the Julian calendar. Another person who was born today is, God willing, another future king, known by the First Nations in Nunavut as the son of the big boss, known by the First Nations in Saskatchewan as the sun looks at him in a good way, known in Manitoba as the leading star, known in Scotland as the Baron of Renfrew, the Earl of Carrick, the Lord of the Isles, the Prince and Great Steward of Scotland, and the Duke of Rothesay, known also as Prince Charles, born today in 1948, 72 today. So we wish a happy birthday to Prince Charles. And if we can say that we do hope that he remembers that he must not alienate his base, okay? And sometimes certain things that he might say can upset his base, and you never want to alienate your base. And so I do hope that he'll take that advice, which is very well meaning, is don't alienate your base by going down angles that politically people would necessarily disagree with. So with that, God save the Queen, and happy birthday to Prince Charles. Also on this day, the 14th of November in 1887, the Black Watch statue, which stands in Aberfeldy, if you've ever been up there, it's quite an impressive statue, that was unveiled today. And on a sad note, today in 1981 was the political assassination and murder of the Reverend Robert Bradford, who was a rising star and a member of Parliament for the Ulster Unionists, murdered on this day, on the 14th of November in 1981. Also in this week in history, 16th of November in 1940, the San Dimitrio was a merchant ship that was bombed in the Atlantic and eventually limped into the Clyde on this day after a real dangerous adventure, after being hit by the Admiral Shear, several shells from the Admiral Shear. And there was a film. The reason we know about her mainly is because there was a film called, what was the film called? San Dimitrio, London, was made, one of the few films about the merchant navy in World War II. On the 18th of November in 1852, the state funeral of the Duke of Wellington in London. And on the 18th, this coming week, in November in 1785, a British painter was born called David Wilkie, who was born in Fife. And he's best known for his painting called Chelsea Pensioners Reading the Gazette at the Battle of Waterloo. And that hangs in the Duke of Wellington's house, and you can visit that. And we wrote an article about that painting, which we'll stick up there in the link back on our legacy site. And it's a famous painting that has been described as synthesizing Britishness. And the historian Linda Colley says that in this scene that he painted is the existence of a mass British patriotism transcending the boundaries of class, ethnicity, occupation, sex, and age. And she points out that the horseman bringing the news is Welsh. The soldiers in the picture are Scots, English, and Irish, and even a black bandsman. And the Chelsea pensioners are reading from a newspaper. The taverns in the background are called the Duke of York, about the war with revolutionary France. There's one named after the War of American Independence, and there's even one named after the hero of Culloden. And so that's an interesting painting, very colourful painting, and that was by David Wilkes, who was born on this day back in 1785. On the 19th of November, the Ulster Tower was opened. This is a commemoration to the men of Ulster who died in World War I. And this was opened on the 19th of November in 1921 at Thiepval in France. Dedicated to the glory of God and grateful memory of the officers, non-commissioned officers and men of the 36th Ulster Division and of the sons of Ulster in other forces who laid down their lives in the Great War, and of all their comrades in arms who by divine grace were spared to testify to their glorious deeds. And it was opened on this day, 19th of November in 1921. And I know some of you will have been there and seen that. And coming up also in this week on the 20th of November, congratulations are due to Her Majesty and Prince Philip, because it will be their 73rd wedding anniversary. That's this 20th of November coming up this week. Their 73rd wedding anniversary, God willing. And they were married in 1947. And staying with the royal theme, also on the 20th of November in 1938, Maud of Wales passed away. Now, Maud was the youngest daughter of Edward VII, and she went on to become the Queen Consort of Norway. And just as you have Prince Charles of Wales, so she was Maud of Wales and also Queen Consort of Norway. And Queen Maudland in Antarctica is named after her. So what we'll be doing this week is putting up all that sort of stuff on our social media platforms, and we'll also be putting up additional historical information, because that's one of our big things, is promoting those historical facts through our social media channels, which are really taken off. Twitter to aside, of course, been suspended from Twitter because they don't believe we're a real account. I mean, how mental is that? And I'm going to give a wee plug, of course, just to this book, which tells you what's happening with social media, deleted by Alam Bukhari. Excellent book, which helps to put what is happening with social media worldwide into proper perspective. And this chap is a journalist with Breitbart news agency. Anyway, that aside, we are doing extremely well, especially on Instagram. This week, we're going to reach 5,000 followers on Instagram, which for something like ourselves, pro-Union, pro-UK, is a very unusually high amount. And I just want to say thank you to our great Instagram team there, and also to our wonderful Facebook team also, for the huge engagement that we're getting these days on Facebook. Over a 1.3 million reach in the last 28 days, and about 1,000 new followers in the last 28 days also on Facebook. And that's due just to the great content that we've got, and to the engagement that everybody brings there. And here on YouTube, this is the next one that we need to build up. We're building about 15 or 20 new followers a week, but we need to get up to 1,000. And when we can get up to 1,000, then we'll be able to monetize, and we'll be able to use phones and broadcast outside, and so on and so forth. So that's what we want to do. Coming up this week, what else are we doing? We're doing a third issue of Union Heart, which is our magazine. We've got 2 issues have been done so far. This week we're working on a third one, which will be out within a fortnight. And if you are a union supporter, then you can request to receive a free copy through the post to you. And if you're already a union supporter, and if you've already done that, we've got your name and address, so you don't need to request again. But if you've requested to be put on our Union Heart list, you'll get the third issue, probably by the end of the month. And that's a good issue as well. And we're styling it so that it will work as a campaigning document for the first few months of next year. So yeah, this video will now go, and it will become a podcast. It will stay up here on our YouTube page, but we'll also be releasing it as a podcast on Wednesday evening. So you can go to forceforgood.uk/podcast, and you can listen to it as well if you like that sort of thing. So we're doing everything that we can on the resources that we've got to really try to get this message out. And I want to say thank you to everybody who watches and who shares our work and who subscribes, because you're the guys that really help to get this out there. Okay, so thank you very much, folks, for watching. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen.